I will just lay the context a little bit before we get into this. So, we are now a day past the budget, which allows us to take a step back from the announcements and look at direction. Compared to Budget 2025, this year's approach to sustainability appears more measured and selective. The emphasis is clearly on capital led growth with large public investment commitments, while sustainability interventions are more targeted, particularly around industrial transition and long term capacity building. What is notable is what has not expanded significantly. There has been no sweeping sustainability push or broad based climate framework, suggesting a conscious choice to prioritize execution and fiscal discipline over ambition alone. In that sense, Budget 2026 builds on last year's intent, but it narrows the lens to where policy believes impact is more achievable. Now, the question for India Inc., all my leaders today represent this segment, therefore, is not just about intent, but it is also about adequacy, alignment, and delivery. Now, the first question, of course, I would like everybody to get in on this. We had a brief mail exchange before this, but I'm hoping we can, get like one point out so that it is not repetitive between the panelists. But let's take the topic head on. Did the budget do enough for sustainability, or did it do what was fiscally convenient? Now, who's going to go first? Narayan, sir, would you like to go first?
No, I think very clearly the the directional thrust of this budget has been to focus on uh, overarching economic parameters, underlying which you will have several programs that intersect with sustainability in some way or the other. The CCUS, for example, the carbon sequestration roadmap, backed by fairly significant outlay for it, is definitely a sustainability focused initiative. But uh, the link with our economic security, by ensuring that hard to abate sectors are able to address European requirements of CBAM, cross-border adjustment mechanism, is very clear, right? So I think the entry point, whether it is for this or for nuclear energy or for artificial intelligence, the entry point for all of this is the larger economic architecture of the country. But in today's world, you cannot avoid sustainability intersections, right? So whatever be your entry point, you'll have to address sustainability in one way or the other. So that's how
Fair
I
enough.
read the overall intent of the budget.
Prabodji, would you like to go up next?
Thanks, Noor. I think Narayan laid out, but I would say this year's union budget signals a very decisive shift, I see, from intent to executions. So that I see very clearly. And the government has very clearly aligned fiscal priority with India's long-term climate commitments, green industrial growth, and inclusive energy transition. These are the three things where I could see a clear focus in this budget. I'm not very sure what Narayanji stated, that if this is in reaction to policy measures from European unions, I don't see that happening. But it's a clear intention to align our own net zero goal of 2070. And I completely agree that, of course, I was expecting the CCUS. If it would have not declared, I would have disappointed. But that's a clear signal that these kind of end of the pipe treatment that's going to happen to meet our net zero commitment is a very welcome step. I think India is one of the countries in the world who has taken this lead, and I'm pretty happy. I always call the last time when we 2 years before, through a delegation through Piki, we met PMO. I was telling the same thing. After the green hydrogen mission, I think it is necessary to have a clean carbon mission on carbon capture utilizations, because if you can combine carbon and hydrogen, you believe me, in the chemistry you can get all the things what you want and all the molecules what you want. I think this is a very significant progress that this budget has given. The big takeaway is, I think shift from policy-led ambitions to the enterprise-led delivery. I think it is on us now to the enterprise, to the large India Inc. to deliver, and that is something which I got a message from this union budget.
Ankit, you want to go ahead?
So if I were to go to the core fundamentals, I think the three kartavya that the finance minister laid out, one was about productivity and competitiveness, the second was about prosperity for people, and the third was sabka saath sabka vikas. If you really think about it, all three align very strongly with what the ethos of sustainability is. So at a conceptual level, I think we are very aligned as a country on sustainability. Having said that, I think on the specifics, if you really think about it, and I'll take the view of mitigation and adaptation. So both on the mitigation side, there are a number of very specific measures that focus on execution, especially on energy transition, including support to, let's say, nuclear as an example, as well as I think the CCUS is a game changer, especially if you club it with the GHG emission guidelines that have come into play. This provides you with a very concrete financial incentive that can make a very meaningful difference in India's total emission footprint. So that's one. On the other hand, the adaptation side is also something that we see a few nuggets of, some of it continuing from last year, especially when it comes to agriculture. While the word sustainability or climate may not have been used in some places, but the actions that we talk about around water security, around, let's say, biodiversity conservation, tourism with respect to biodiversity, there's a bunch of things that aligns with it. The third point that I would add is, if you were to again go back to the fundamentals of where the money is being allocated. So for instance, the capital expenditure, now it also depends on the industry and the ecosystem on how do we make sure that this growth itself is sustainable. So for instance, when it comes to infrastructure spending, steel and cement are two key components. We already have the the guidelines to decarbonize both these sectors. The right support through CCUS, through energy transition is there. So it's important that we start integrating the principles of sustainability and environment in all the execution work across the sectors. And this goes for SEZs, this goes for data centers, all the different areas which the budget is prioritizing. Now, I think the focus is more on how do we make sure that whatever development or spend is happening is being done in a sustainable manner. So that's at least how I look at the entire thing. Let me pause with that.
Completely agree. Yeah, completely agree with you. Ram, you're kind of closing the round.
Yeah, enviable. It's not enviable to go last, especially after three stalwarts have given such extensive coverage of this budget. But I'm going to focus on slightly different aspect of it. I mean, I think I'm in complete agreement that the right words are being said. The principles of sustained principles of resilience, the principles of carbon capture, the principles of resilient agriculture, which has been mentioned multiple times in this budget. However, I feel that where the disappointment for me a little bit is, I think it's not ambitious enough in terms of how much could have been allocated for it. For example, if we really and I'm a little bit more focused on the agri sector because we do a lot of work on resilient agriculture and looking at how that can contribute towards not just climate change but also towards positioning India as a supplier of low emission farm commodities to the world. Now, I think time is of the essence here, and I don't believe we can wait to slowly ramp spending in this area. I think we could have been a bit more ambitious in terms of how much allocation could have happened towards agriculture, towards resilient agriculture, towards at least there's been a lot of money allocated towards analytics in terms of forecasting, but not enough in terms of, for example, linking crop insurance with climate resilience or encouraging resilient agricultural practices. So there I feel, maybe, we missed a little bit of a trick. So like I said, the principles are correct. They're saying all the right things. They're allotting the right money to the right initiatives, but it needs to be more because I don't think we're able to quite foresee how critical the situation really is. We are not in the position to ramp up efforts on sustainability slowly anymore. It has to be almost a radical. It's easier said than done, I know, because there are lots of other priorities, but I think somewhere we're missing reading the signs that this may be the biggest crisis of our time, more so than any other planetary event. So I think maybe a bit more prioritization in terms of allocation of funds, but the principles are correctly in place.
Broadly, this kind of brings out all the discussions we have had yesterday. I do want to narrow the focus to some elements of the budget just so that we really get into this threadbare. Now, the decarbonization, basically industrial decarbonization, that did get highlighted a bit in this budget. In fact, I would say one of the clearest signals this year was the focus on industrial decarbonization. So, Prabodha, just want to pull you into this part of the discussion now. From a heavy industry perspective, is the scale and structure sufficient to enable real transition? We don't have a wider carbon framework, so to say, but so does that limit the effectiveness in some format?
You see, I am an optimist. What I see, sustainability doesn't happen overnight. A decarbonization, structural changes cannot happen overnight. The most important thing is that we have to see whether these policies or the budget is giving a consistent directions for a longer period of time. In 1 year, India's budget, it is very difficult to address all the issues that industry is facing, or to give enough resource to manage this significant challenge. I completely agree with Ram in the sense that yes, we are in a serious issue to address the problem in hand. But question is that do we have sufficient resource to allocate to industrial decarbonizations with and making a balance of the growth of the nations that is required. So we need to be a little pragmatic, and that is where I see the directions is consistent. Look, if you look at the budgets previously, from last couple of years, at least 3-4 years, we are observing there are emphasis now coming specifically towards climate change or sustainability into the budget. Earlier, it was not there. That doesn't mean government of India was not focusing on sustainability, because it is not only one aspect, because there are multiple aspects to be addressed. Now, when it comes to industrial decarbonization, that is where I see what is the continuation happening. Like we had a green hydrogen mission, now we have a CCU's mission.
Sure.
And if you look at the focus has been from, India's focus has been to promote clean energy. But I think now, along with the clean energy, we need to clean the energy system as well. So that means we have to have reliance with a basket of energy systems, not only renewable energy that is going to solve the problem. And that is where this carbon capture supports that idea, nuclear energy supports that idea, support for the critical mineral supports that idea. So I see, we need energy sufficiency or energy reliance through a focus of clean energy and cleaning the energy systems together. When it comes to decarbonizing the sectors that you mentioned, where I am day in and day out working, it's not an easy task. It doesn't have a silver bullet, and it requires right policies, which I believe it is there. Always question, is the scale sufficient? Is the resources allocated sufficient? Is there technology available to push this forward? I think all these are questionable. We can always debate, but I think we all need to work together. Policy frameworks are there. We need to work on technological developments. We need to also implement in large scale. So that is where I'm happy that we are taking the right directions. When it will make real significant impact, I think we have to have patience.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I am now going to prove how stubborn journalists can be. So now, while I also agree it's a good budget, all good, all positive, I still feel that it did feel a little bit more restrained in its signaling. So I'm going to request Narayan sir now to give me an answer over here. This is like the tech, I want to bring the tech point also over here. I remember a couple of years you pointed out to us that all the tech expansion we are doing can happen at the cost of sustainability, despite all the conversations, because ultimately it's not all green, right? When we're expanding data centers and doing large computation. But from a tech and an execution standpoint, are companies now better equipped to deliver sustainability outcomes without the aggressive policy pushes? Or is data, measurement, reporting still like a real bottleneck?
Yeah. So, I think the two other developments in the last 1 month or so, or actually last 1 week, that we should take cognizance of when looking at this year's budget and what it could lead up to. One is, of course, the economic survey. It was released, the day before, and also the recommendations of the 16th Finance Commission, which was tabled in Parliament and which was accepted. Now, Well, the reason why I'm saying this is when it comes to tech, particularly artificial intelligence, what we see here in this budget is uh, that with the overarching objective of encouraging data sovereignty and giving incentives for AI data centers. The interesting thing is the focus is not so much on the downstream AI applications as much as to the upstream hardware part of it, the semiconductor manufacturing and the data centers. Uh, the budget has announced tax exemption for the global tech majors. Now one can debate, then you are encouraging AI sovereignty, but you're still having the global tech majors playing a major role. So you're giving them tax exemption for their data services that they will export outside. So it's a good thing that you're exporting data services from India, so India can be seen as a data center hub and so on. There are caveats to this. But if you read the fine print, and that's what I was trying to do, uh, it says that there is a green capex fund where you're eligible for green capex grants. Those grants are conditional on these data centers achieving certain levels of energy efficiency and water efficiency. Typically, it's called PUE and WE, water utilization efficiency and power utilization efficiency. I thought it was very interesting that you're saying on one hand that I want to encourage AI and data centers in India, but I will link it to sustainability outcomes, through this incentive mechanism. Having said that, what will remain to be seen is, as always, when it comes to the rubber hitting the road, which is how will you implement it, the governance mechanism for this. So that's really going to be critical, right? So yes, but I think this budget did take that step forward of giving that incentive to AI sovereignty in India, linking it to some extent at least, to power and energy efficiency. But I think there's also this unsaid statement that the greening of AI infrastructure will happen organically on the back of the greening of the grid that we are targeting. Now, you can argue 2070, is it good enough and all that? But that is what I think the underlying philosophy is. I'll pause there.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to agree with that completely. In fact, the budget did appear to place overall, not just from a tech AI standpoint, it did appear that the budget had placed greater responsibility on enterprises to drive sustainability outcomes themselves. From your experience, has the balance shifted from policy-led to enterprise-led? And what would this mean from a capital allocation standpoint?
I'm going to, specifically talk about this one data point in the budget allocation for the Ministry of Environment. The budget for the NGT went up by 400%. So while the overall budget for Ministry of Environment has increased only by a small percentage, which basically means that the checker is going to be a lot more empowered, and as a result you can very conveniently say that the organizations, both large as well as medium sized organizations, will have to be more strictly compliant with all the things that's expected of them. So that is one shift that I would see there. The second thing is, I'll sort of agree with Mr. Narayan in terms of that the onus will have to lie with all the other departments. So in the corporate ecosystem, we often talk about this thing that sustainability is not delivered by the sustainability teams; it's delivered by the other functions, be it manufacturing, procurement, marketing, and everyone else. Similarly, in the government ecosystem, also now the onus is on the different departments, be it Ministry of Steel, Ministry of Power, Ministry of Renewable Energy, etc., to really think about how do they integrate and accelerate it. So when it comes to data centers, the incentives which enable green data centers, when it comes to special economic zone, adding more guidelines that enable that. I think all of this coupled with some of the regulations, especially around EPR that have come in the last couple of years or so across tires and end of life vehicles, etc., battery regulations. So all of them clubbed together definitely saying that the onus is going to be more on the private sector, but at the same time in a manner that makes financial sense, that makes a business case for doing these investments. And wherever the business case is not very well established yet, which is, let's say, as an example, nuclear energy or CCUS, the government is willing to step in and provide that incentive. But the heavy lifting has to be done a lot more by the private sector.
I love it. Rama, I'm going to bring this conversation to you now. Every time we talk sustainability, we have to talk about stuff like emissions, etc. However, like where I want to move the conversation to is a little bit on communities and behavior change. Again, compared to last year, did the budget this year do enough to support inclusive everyday sustainability, like say across supply chain, livelihood, consumption?
I think it is done enough, because I think the onus of doing a lot of this lies with, it should be market driven. It shouldn't really be government driven. Because I think it's up to the companies and the private sector to really incentivize better behavior, whether it's in supply chains, whether it's in customers, or whether it's even in way upstream in terms of where they source from, whether it's agricultural commodities or it's mining or minerals. The entire behavior change has to be incentive linked. It cannot be it cannot be top down driven largely enough anymore. There's enough that the government is doing in terms of awareness campaigns, be it about water, be it about plastics, be it about air pollution. What we're really missing is the market-driven incentives. I mean, we're not really seeing how, for example, equal labeling of products, or we're not seeing. If you could take an example of incentives for, I mentioned climate resilient farming earlier, but it could also be in terms of building infrastructure. How do we incentivize public infrastructure to be greener in the way they're constructing? How do we incentivize climate resilience to be part of the insurance programs? Those market linked incentives are what's not really being created. I don't think there's enough missions and visions and programs for education. I think this is where the private sector really has to take a lead in really utilizing some of this momentum, and they have to invest in this.
Though your video was pausing in between, but we heard you clearly. We have the last 4 minutes left somehow. I don't know how, but just taking it now to to the closing part of the discussion. One question to all of you again, which is any change or priority that you would like to see in the next budget to make sustainability more structural, long term. I still feel the budget was very selective this time. So to make it more long term. Now, this one, Ram will go second on you. Ankit, why don't you begin with this one?
Absolutely. I think in terms of, if you refer to the World Economic Forum's risk report, if you take a slightly mid to long term view, you realize a disproportionate number of risks are climate related. And even from an India standpoint, we are a highly vulnerable country when it comes to climate change. So I think a lot more focus needs to also be given to adaptation as a whole, both in terms of food security, but also topics like heat stress for an instance. So in the last 5 years, let's say the severity, intensity of heat stress versus the next 5 years, it's going to be really bad. So how do we incentivize the right behavior, right allocation there? Things like cooling, for instance, the energy requirement for that will really go up. So really taking a adaptation lens to how do we make sure that that the country is better prepared. And again, adaptation is an area that generally disproportionately affects the bottom 30, 40, 50% more so than the top 50%. So I think bringing that lens in would be really important as we go forward.
Ram, I'm making it easier for you this time.
You always have to predict what Prabodha Narayan sir will say on this. But lastly, in agreement with what Ankit said, but I also would like to add, I'd like to see more ambition in terms of allocation of finances. I know it's a constant battle between priorities as to what is really important. But like Ankit said, it's no longer something where we can wait and watch. There are some things which are extremely urgent or emergent in terms of risk, and we need to arrest those right now. And I don't even look at it purely as a risk. I think there's a massive opportunity for us to really position ourselves from a market leadership perspective in terms of sustainability. I don't think anybody here disagrees that it's equal number of opportunities it offers in terms of access to the world's markets. And where I'd like to see a major shift perhaps in the next budget is bringing the financial sector more to the table when it comes to climate change. I don't think we've really incentivize or engage them enough. And, when you talk about finance mission, it's still very nascent. I know Ankit and his group are doing a lot of work on spreading knowledge in this space, but we're still nibbling around the edges. I think we need to get the financial sector to the table and really ask them to put their money where their mouth is in terms of enabling sustainable change.
Here, let me have little grievance also where I'm not happy and where I like to see things. See, I don't think we are doing the basic things right. I clearly see clean water and clean air are basic human needs. And every citizen of India deserves a better air quality and better water quality while we grow and develop. While the cacophony on sustainability is being towards climate mitigations, and these are so closely related, I don't see enough things happening. So that means, in a sense, what the data point Ankit gave about higher allocations towards implementation, I think this is a need. This is needed. Uh, Things people need to penalize who are violating. Industry need to be really responsible for not doing the right things, and the government also need to focus more. And this budget was completely silenced when you talk about, and I know our capital is one of the worst polluted capital in the world. I mean, this is not acceptable. This is not acceptable, and we need more on this.
Thank you so much, Prabodji. He was very pro budget. We changed him a little bit.
No, I mean, I'm stating the fact. I told where I liked, and I am very clear what I didn't like, and I was expecting. And I will see that more and more things included, and implementation is the main key point. So we need to
Thank you so
really
much.
do that more.
So much. Narayan sir, like every sensible journalist in this segment, the last word should always be with you. We'll help you. We'll request you to help us conclude.
I'm just going to take off from what Prabodh said and the other three said. Let me start with the analogy of the company. In the company's ESG strategy today, we've seen over a period of time the pivot happening from environment to social. And social here really means people. People at the workplace, people in supply chain, people in communities. Right? Very clearly that's there. BRSR has enabled it. I think what we're saying is, when you look at the country as a whole, a similar pivoting needs to happen. It is happening, but needs to happen. The livability of our cities, for example, what Prabodha was referring to. How do you make our cities more livable for the most vulnerable? Whether that is air quality or access to clean water, access to clean sanitation, and so on, right? The second thing that some economists point out is a missing middle. As India grows and develops, what can you do to make our workers more productive so that we make the jump and the missing middle class sort of gets filled up by people who get the right inputs in education, skilling, and so on. I think the national education policy and this budget has tried to address that to some extent. My overarching point is looking forward, the intersection between economic goals, technology goals, and environmental goals. At the end of it all, it has to resonate in terms of what it means for people on the ground. And that can happen, by calling out some of these things very specific. How do you make a dense urban slum more livable by providing for water? How do you clean up the air a little bit, and so on?
I think I just wanted to add a point and completely echo with Prabodha and Narayan on livability of the cities, but specifically building a bit from the COP. I think there's a lot of global funds and investments that is very willing to come in India and fund water, air pollution, etc. All that is missing is the enabling guidelines. So if we get that in place, it actually solves both the issues of the best technology, global funding coming to India. As long as we prioritize and build the right guidelines around it. So I think right from specifics of right from mechanical sweeping to decarbonizing the power plants to how do we take care of further acceleration of electric vehicles and so on. There's a number of different areas where the economics have started working out. We just need to really create more enabling factors for global investment to come in there as well. And I do believe that there's a lot more that we can do in terms of the livability of our cities. That's a very important point. Just reiterating that.
Just on the implementation bit, I completely echo with that, which is why I think we need to fund enforcement agencies better. I think that is something which is very low right now. We don't invest enough in a strong enforcement directorate for environment. I think that needs to really change.
Excellent. Thank you, panelists. I wish I had more time because I loved my conversation with you. I just want to thank everyone again. Thank you, Narayan sir, Prabodji, Ankit, Ram. Thank you so much.